for roll call.
Chair Farmer? Chair Farmer?
Yes, sorry.
Commissioner Cohen?
Here.
Commissioner McEnany?
Yes, here.
Commissioner Paulson?
Here.
Commissioner Zaidi? Commissioner Zaidi?
Here.
And Dylan, I just want to make sure that proper notice has been established for this meeting.
The proper notice has been established.
Sounds good. So let's move on to any matters coming from the public that are not specifically in this agenda.
And no public comment at this time.
Thank you. Let's move on to item number 3, staff updates and public input regarding communities of interest, including the maps from Sherry.
Yes, good evening, commissioners. So as you noticed that we have received quite a bit public comment since the last meeting. We have received about 55 comments, and just to note that all of the comments have been uploaded to our website, so they're visible at this time to the public. I'm going to go through just real briefly the comments that we have received. So the first, let me just go down the list here. So to keep the town of Mendocino in the 5th district, we've received a little over 30 comments. Keep Laytonville in the 3rd district, about 3 comments. Include Laytonville in the 4th district. We have 1 recommendation for a draft map 1, 3 recommendations for draft map 2, 2 recommendations for draft map 3. There's been a recommendation for a single coast district, 2 of those. Move the northern boundary of 5th district to Fern Creek Road. Community of interest is coast Noyo River to Navarro River. Include all of Hopland area in 1 district. Willett's community of interest includes Mira Mill Road and Williams Ranch Road. Adjust for population, make as few changes as possible. Reduce area of 5th district, make a 6th district. Northern boundary of 5th district to the Casper Bridge. We've received some oral responses. Reduce the area of the 5th district, make it more coastal. Move the northern boundary of the 5th district to Road 409. And add areas adjacent to the city of Ukiah into the 2nd district. And so this is a summary of the comments that we've received since the last meeting. And as I stated, all of these comments are on our website. And all the commissioners have received them all also.
Thank you, Sherry. Charlotte, have there been any changes to the deadlines for the redistricting process?
Thank you, Chair Farmer. No, from my research, there have not been any changes to our December 15th deadline for the board to have adopted the final maps.
Thank you. And it looks like we're going to review the redistricting criteria.
Yes, I prepared a short 6-slide presentation if the clerk is able to share that now. Thank you. So at the last meeting, this commission indicated it would like a little more detailed discussion about the required criteria, specifically focusing on the issue of equal population and based on some questions from Commissioner Pallison. And so I have this short 6-slide presentation that will go into the required redistricting criteria and kind of talk about it in the context of the current stage where we're at in the process of redistricting. So looking at this first slide, among the required redistricting criteria, there are a couple of rules in redistricting that are based on federal constitutional principles and federal law that all counties must consider when drawing district lines. The first required criteria is equal population. Each district should have substantially the same total population. And this principle, all of you may have heard of the one person, one vote principle. It's a fundamental principle to democracy, and it's embedded in the US Constitution. It came from US Supreme Court cases, I think around the early 1960s. Specifically here, you'll see quoted Reynolds versus Sims, in which it was the Warren Court there. The Chief Justice wrote the opinion for that case. And in that case, they were considering, without getting into too many of the facts, an issue in Alabama, I believe it was, where the state legislature had apportioned district representatives, not according to population, but according to land area, so geographic area, without consideration for there are more densely populated areas that would seem to be underrepresented compared to more rural areas. And so in that case, the Chief Justice Warren, one of the main quotes that you may hear from this case that is also kind of the basis for this principle is the Equal Protection Clause, and that's in the 14th Amendment of our US Constitution, demands no less than substantially equal state legislative representation for all citizens of all places and as well for all races. And this case was about state legislatures, but the same criteria is also required for local redistricting, such as counties in California. So you'll see quoted here, California Election Code, section 21500 is the part of the Fair Maps Act, our state law that governs our redistricting process. And in the very first section, section A, it says the board, and referring to the board is the Board of Supervisors, shall adopt boundaries for all of these supervisorial districts of the county so that the supervisorial district shall be substantially equal in population as required by the United States Constitution. And so the principle of equal population was expanded further in Supreme Court cases and in California Supreme Court cases, refining the concept for state and local jurisdictions like counties, and recognized that minor deviations from equal population from the one person, one vote principle may be necessary to permit other legitimate redistricting objectives. And in the case Brown versus Thompson from 1983, the Supreme Court held and stated a plan with a maximum population deviation under 10% falls within the category of minor deviations from the one person, one vote principle. And so this is not to say that we should aim to get as close as we can to 10%, rather that if the record, based on the information you have in front of you, based on the legitimate redistricting criteria from our state law, supports a map with a minor deviation from equal population, it will not automatically be illegal under this case law. It's not to say it still could not be challenged. So that's why I would recommend not trying to get as close as you can to 10% and trying to create maps that have deviations of 9.9%, which I don't suggest that this commission is attempting to do. But I wanted to explain that even though there is this 10% this vote from this case law, and it's well-established case law, The court is not saying 10% is fine in all cases. It's just saying if we were challenged, the court would look at the record as a whole and see if we had to, if the commission and the board of supervisors had to deviate, a minor deviation from the one person, one vote from equal population in addressing other legitimate criteria, to preserve contiguity, to preserve communities of interest. And so that's a little bit more detail about the 10% rule. And here in the bottom of the slide, you'll see, and this is something we've reviewed in other prior meetings since we received the updated 2020 census statistics. The current 2011 districts indicate there is a deviation of 14.7% between our least populated district, District 4, and our most populated district, District 3. So right now, we already know that there are some adjustments that have to be made to meet this required criteria. Next slide, please. So the other federal, this is based in federal law, federal statute, the other criteria that we have to consider, the commission has to consider in drawing the lines, is the Voting Rights Act, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And this prohibits adopting districts which dilute racial and language minority voting rights by denying an equal opportunity to elect candidates of their choice. And so the question as to whether there is a dilution of racial or language minority voting rights that we must ask first is, in Mendocino County, is there a large and geographically compact minority population that might constitute a majority in one of our single member districts? So greater than 50% of the population, looking at our ideal district size based on our total population, is there 50% of a minority or language minority community that could comprise the majority of a district? If there is, then the Voting Rights Act requires that we look to prevent packing or cracking, terms that we've talked about before, so that we don't dilute the ability of that minority community to elect as many candidates as they could. So with packing, we want to avoid packing all of the minority population into one district when they could conceivably comprise a majority of more than one district. And then with cracking, avoiding fracturing a community that could comprise the majority in one district into three, so that there isn't, and that's just an example, so that there wouldn't be an opportunity for that minority community to potentially elect a member of their choice, their preferred candidate. So if there isn't this geographically compact minority population, we may not consider race or ethnicity as that predominant factor to draw lines. And just a little caveat here, this is where the census and the question of equal population looks at the total census population, and that population doesn't differentiate between citizenship or age, for example. So looking at equal population is looking at all of the population, from baby to elders, citizens or not. But when we look at this question of diluting voting rights, the minority population statistics and demographics that are reviewed, that must be reviewed according to the Department of Justice, is this citizen voting age population. So that's why the tables you will see that associate draft maps, the population is, the numbers are a little bit different from the total numbers from the census. And so looking at Mendocino County as a whole, we do not have a large geographically compact minority population right now that could comprise more than 50% of any one district. Next slide, please. And so we've talked about this before. The next couple of slides are getting more into the ranked state criteria. All of this is within the same section, 21,500. This is section C, 1 through 5. The Board of Supervisors shall adopt supervisorial district boundaries using the following criteria in order of priority. So the very first, most important of the ranked state criteria, after you've already addressed substantial population and whether there are any potential compliance issues with Voting Rights Act, the next thing we need to look at is contiguity. And so this, of course, is keeping districts from jumping around and that everything comprises a contiguous district. And then followed by we're to minimize the division of neighborhoods and communities of interest. And this community of interest is a term we've talked a lot about, and we've received a lot of public comment, or well, I shouldn't say a lot. We're beginning to receive more public comment on this. And there's been discussion by commissioners about communities of interest. And so this is where we look at communities that describe themselves and are connected to a map, or they're connected to a location. It is mappable and not dispersed throughout the county. And does this population share common social or economic interests that should be included in one district and not divided into two? And there's a reason for keeping them together for effective and fair representation. Some communities may actually benefit from being in more than one district, and some do not. And so that's where you will listen to the stories we've heard from our community, and in your discussions on narrowing down and determining the maps that you'll recommend to the Board of Supervisors. And so part of this, the communities of interest are not, and by definition in the definition of communities of interest in the election code, they do not include relationships with political parties or incumbents, preferring a particular supervisor over another, or preferring a particular political party or political candidate. That would not be within the definition of a community of interest. Next slide, please. And then, as you see, the next three ranked criteria in descending priority, keeping together our cities and our census designated places, our towns. And so in Mendocino County, as you all know from reviewing the maps and looking at our numbers, our largest city, the city of Ukiah, happens to have a total population, the city boundaries, which is under the total population of our, it's within the ideal population size of our, if we divided all the districts equally, and over time and currently, as of the 2011 redistricting, it comprises it is within the district, same district, and not divided into two. In areas where there are cities that are larger and they exceed that ideal population, that's where you'll see it more often than not, that a city might have to have some division, that it just isn't possible to meet our requirements of equal population, and the city has to be divided in some way. The next criteria, of course, is an easily identifiable boundary. And these can be natural or artificial, mountains, canyons, rivers, roads, highways. And then finally, compactness and trying to keep the geographic areas of a district compact. And this, you'll note, is not as highly ranked. It's the least ranked criteria. It's often the criteria that there has to be some give to, because these are ranked because they're to be considered in order of priority, but there is an understanding that it isn't an exact science, that we may not be able to keep each of our 5 districts compact. And then finally, there is a section of the Fair Max Act that directly states we cannot consider political parties at all as a reason for drawing district lines. Next slide, please. So in summary are the main points, and these are just a couple that will be important to consider when you're looking at the maps that have been proposed, that are offered today. We already know there are a couple of maps that exceed the equal population requirement that would not be able to be adopted by the Board of Supervisors. And so we'll wait. Leaf will get into some review of that. But the key points for considering the maps and refining them and creating maps to be considered. There may be significant variation in the geographic area. We know that because population is not equally dispersed. So as long as the districts have substantially equal population, that variance in size is completely acceptable. Also the Board of Supervisors and this commission, now that you've begun to receive more public comment, we must view that public input and comment through the lens of the required redistricting criteria. So, looking at, is this public comment within the required criteria? Can it be interpreted as supporting, an identifiable community of interest, for example? And then finally, the board would not be able to adopt a map that doesn't meet our required redistricting criteria, even if there's strong public support for it. So next slide, please. So the next steps today and in our next couple of meetings, today Leaf will go over the first 4 maps that were drafted by members of the public, including some members of the commission, and look at them for our compliance with our required criteria, and then focusing on identifying preferred maps or suggested possible changes and new configurations of maps to bring forward at our next redistricting commission meeting. And just to keep in mind, we've been really challenged, and this commission has worked so hard and diligently met every week since we've been created, since it's been created to consider this redistricting. But we do have deadlines that we're facing, and so we want to provide the Board of Supervisors enough time to adopt the final map. And so where we're at right now, we have a couple of meetings, and then on our meeting on November 3rd, that is where the commission will need to narrow maps to figure out the 2 to 3 or 4 at most. You don't want to provide too many alternatives, but find your focus, narrowing your maps to present to the board on November 9th. And I hope this helped, to kind of revisit. I know it's a refresher. I know you've heard many of this before, but I wanted to give a little more detail and more context, and especially at the stage where we're at of actually looking at draft maps.
Please go ahead, Mary.
My question is, what's on my meeting list is that the 29th of October is the last day that the public can submit a map. I need to verify that, and also wondering, can they continue to submit comments after that date? Thank you.
I can answer that for you, Commissioner Zaidi. So that tentative deadline of October 29th is a deadline for considering maps that are offered by the public, but it isn't a deadline at all for public comment. It's a tentative deadline, but it is fairly realistic in light of our deadlines with trying to narrow maps, because we're getting to the point where we will have limited time to recommend maps to the Board of Supervisors for adoption. We have there are certain scheduled meetings with the Board of Supervisors. Even a special meeting was set to accommodate the crunch that we've been faced with the deadlines for redistricting. And so that is not to suggest there cannot be public comment, and it will be welcomed at every opportunity, at every meeting. It's just to say we need to create some kind of tentative deadline for the staff to be able to create the maps for you with the required tables, and for you as a commission to be able to narrow things down to your preferred maps that you recommend as a majority to the Board of Supervisors. So it's tentative, but it is somewhat realistic. Comments can be made, though, at every meeting, at every stage in the process.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dee, can you go ahead?
I have a question regarding what contiguous means. The definitions that I had found focused on not breaking up a district into a lot of little pieces that weren't connected. But is it possible to have one district within an entire another district? Like using our county as an example, if we had District 1 and then within the boundaries of District 1 was District 2, like District 1 surrounded District 2, would that work?
So that's a very good question. I would say that does not meet the definition of contiguous, because it is isolating a district and enveloping it. I think the contiguous would be keeping a district together in one chunk, one mappable area. But I haven't seen an example of that, but I would venture to say that would not be a contiguous district.
Google Donut District under case law. Peter.
I just wanted to thank Charlotte for this presentation. I think it was very helpful. And I want to thank Dee for asking for it. I would also request from Charlotte and the staff if they could send this PowerPoint presentation file out to all the commissioners so that we have it to review as we look at the proposed maps that are coming forward. Is that possible?
Yes, Commissioner McNamee, I believe it is posted on our website as an attachment to the agenda, but we could also email it to, it's on our redistricting website associated with today's meeting, and we can also, I'm sure we can email it to the commission as well as an attachment.
Thank you. I'd appreciate that. And I'll lower my hand.
So Sherry, is the commissioner comment at this time to respond to public comment that was received in letters, or would that be something that would happen in community of interest testimony agenda item number 4?
So the the commissioner's comment would just be if they had any comments to the staff updates.
Okay.
And any questions for us too.
Thank you. Do we have any more commissioner comment? And do we have any public comment on this item?
It does look like we have some public comment on this item. And I just want to give a brief note that it's going to be *9 to raise your hand if you have a question, and *6 to unmute and mute. I'm going to go ahead and let the first person in now, Jerry Stoutley.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to indicate that I had a public comment. I've been following it with interest, but I have nothing to say at this time. I did send an email in earlier, but I'm sure that you have received it, so I have nothing to say at this time. I did raise my hand because I was having trouble with my audio feed, but I will shut up now.
Thanks, Jerry. So then the next person is going to be Jay, and I will allow Jay in here to speak in just a moment.
So my comment was that when I looked at this, I saw that Ted Williams' district, it appeared in one of the groups, would move south of Mendocino, and that he would serve less people and Dan Jurdy would serve more, including Laytonville. And I don't think that's an appropriate move. I think Ted Williams should continue to serve Mendocino where he lives. Dan is not so responsive to his constituents. And there was one currently where I think the 4th district starts around Casper, ends at Casper, but I'd like to see Ted continue to serve those people in Mendocino and just south of Casper, and that Laytonville should not be moved to District 4, that it should stay on the inland supervisors page. And that's just my opinion. When you look at it and you look at some of the numbers on these, I don't think there's a reason to increase Dan's amount of people that he serves, because it's very difficult to reach him. But Ted Williams, I'm in the 4th district and I could text Ted and I get a response. And I really appreciate that. And I don't think that you should jeopardize his position by moving him outside of Mendocino, and that he would have to relocate. And that's my really personal opinion and my professional opinion and whatever opinion you want. But thank you for listening to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
That was all the public comment for this one.
Thank you. That brings us on to agenda item number 4, community of interest testimony. Do we have any live community of interest testimony from the public?
Clerk, looks like we do have one with Jerry.
Jerry has put his hand down.
He did. Okay, thank you. No public comment, Chair.
Okay. So would this be a time to discuss the public comment that we received in letters?
I would defer to Charlotte if I'm not stating this correctly, but this would just be as if callers, if there was public comment at this time, in addition to the letters that we've received.
Dee?
I just want to, again, talk about the 5th district as a community of interest. I'd like to remind us of the comment that Kyle made last week that said maybe we should make some really controversial suggestion to make people mad and get them to comment. I think it worked. I mean, I can't, by my last count, we had all 30 comments in the last 2 days from people from Mendocino, along with the several from Laytonville. And some not so tolerant or empathetic to the process, which was interesting, but all are resolute about what they perceive as their community, why they don't want to see any changes, and their insistence on keeping their representation and community intact. And I just want to say that I totally and completely understand their passion. And the reasons that they list are exactly the reasons why the west side of the Ukiah Valley has no business being in District 5. I'm not saying that I have come up with a solution to that problem, but I feel really strongly about this. The communities of the Western Ukiah Valley have no connection to coastal communities. And to use their words, we share resources, schools, disasters, boundaries, climate, politics, a culture with Ukiah and not with the coast. And this community of interest has been lumped into District 5, apparently since the 1991 maps, to meet the population requirements, resulting at best inadequate or subordinate representation, and at worst, no representation at all. And I just feel really strongly that we should come up with at least one option that addresses this shortfall. Not that it will be adopted, or I don't even know, I haven't been able to come up with a solution, but I really think we need to look for a way to try to include or try to make it so the Russian River watershed, the Ukiah Valley, Potter Valley, Redwood Valley have compact representation and not just slough off the west side of Ukiah Valley and Hopland into District 5 because it makes the numbers easier. So that's all I want to say on this.
Thank you, Dee. Peter?
Yeah, I based on the comments that we've received and the input we've received so far, I have a similar kind of feeling about the rebalancing of population between District 3 and District 4. Clearly, at this point, the way the existing maps are constructed, District 3 has the most people in it, and District 4 has the least. And as a result, I believe we're over a 14% level of disparity between the most populated and least populated. So it behooves us. I think I think that the elephant in the room is there has to be some population move from the 3rd district into the 4th. Otherwise, the only other mechanism that I can see for doing this is a really radical redrawing of district boundaries, which I believe if we tried to do would provoke a lot more distress among the public than what we've seen just in the last couple of weeks with the sort of minor changes, relatively minor changes that have been suggested. And so my feeling is, based on the input that we've gotten to date, I think we should all be sensitive that we should, well, at least from my standpoint, I'm looking at this as do the least amount of harm necessary to comply with the requirements, and harm being change. People, I believe what we've gotten is a lot of input that says that for the most part, and it may be that the southern part of the Ukiah Valley is the exception to that, but for the most part, I think most of the input we've gotten is that people are actually pretty happy with the existing district boundaries. And if we didn't have the great disparity between the 4th and the 3rd, we probably would be receiving a lot of public input that just says, leave it alone. What seems my feeling about this is I want to kind of approach this from the standpoint of do the least amount of change necessary to meet the requirements, because I believe that serves the public the best at this point. They are used to these district boundaries, and arbitrarily moving them around, I think does a great disservice. And I hope the intent of my comment is clearer, but it's just, this is a complex area, as we've seen from the criteria review we just got from Charlotte, and we have to be careful about it. But I still think that is what I'm gleaning from this comment that we've had from the public is that, particularly in, I think, the Laytonville area, in the village of Mendocino, we've gotten a pretty clear signal that people don't want to see those areas moved from the current districts they're in. Now, maybe I'm misreading that, but that's what I'm reading. Thank you.
Dee?
I hear what you're saying, Peter. But at the same time, I'm feeling like we're hearing from the community of Mendocino and the South Coast and what they want. That's who we're hearing from. And while I respect what they say, and I'm not suggesting that changing the district that Mendocino is in is the solution, but every resident deserves that same consideration. And I talk to people who are in the Ukiah Valley, who are in the fifth district. Every single person I've talked to doesn't know what district they're in. There are those who think they're in District 1 and they're in District 5. There are those who thought they were in District 5 who are in District 2. I mean, it's just it's too confusing because it doesn't make any sense. So they don't have a voice, and so they aren't involved. They say, I don't even know who my representative is because it doesn't make any sense. So I feel like we can't fall into the squeaky wheel gets the grease trap. But I do want to clarify that I am not suggesting that we change the district that Mendocino is in, but I do feel that we need to give every resident of the county the same consideration that the residents of the Mendocino area are asking for. You're right in that District 4 we need to change the population there, but there was one suggestion in public comment that said, let's just change District 4 so it encompasses Round Valley and Covelo. I mean, that's a pretty huge change in District 4's boundary. And I reached out to the tribe the tribal council in Round Valley. I haven't heard back from the council themselves yet. I did talk to their administrator. And while there may be a connection to the coast that makes sense for Round Valley to be in District 4, but those are the kind of things we need to look at, kind of thinking outside of the box to solve this problem. But I don't think we should do that without asking the people who are affected by it what they, if we're on the right track. I mean, I don't want to say putting Covelo in District 4 solves our problems if Covelo and the Round Valley tribes don't feel like they really have a connection to District 4, and that's where they should be. But I don't know that we can other than just saying, okay, we'll just leave things the way they are and not make any changes. And this was just an exercise in our democratic process and didn't really do anything. But I do think we should try to come up with solutions, even if they are big changes, to make sure that all of our residents feel like they have a voice. That's all.
Mary?
I think you both have great points. And I think certainly the village of Mendocino has made a voice, so has Laytonville. I think that there's a very good voice about changing some of the boundaries. We're going to have to do some fine tuning, delicate changes perhaps to help the better representation in that part of the Ukiah Valley. I do think that the tribes, given that you have a lot of Indian population in Laytonville, I would not suspect they're going to identify that strongly with the coast, but I think reaching out to them and asking them is the right thing to do. Finally, I think the one area that I would consider a major change is the Hopland area, because I believe there is a movement. We'd hear about Hopland and that whole area being part of that geographic area. It would take a lot of creative nip and tuck to be able to pull it off. But I think there is a movement there to stay in that watershed and to join. And it would be a fairly large change, but I think possibly there's a motivation for it. Thank you.
I guess as the chair, I can call on myself. I think that I've heard Ted Williams actually in Board of Supervisors meetings quite eloquently point out the problems with inertia. And I do think it's important, as Dee has urged us to do, to look at this map with fresh eyes and to try to see what really makes sense, because as much as proportional districts allow for one person, one vote, districts that have strong core populations and then these sort of vestigial populations, I think are really problematic for democracy. I mean, it's a more subtle form of democratic problem, but it is still one. And the where we've seen this voice the most is in the issues with the size and shape and scope of District 5. But I see the same problem happening if we were to solve this population problem, which I agree with Peter. I don't think there's any reason to do anything larger than necessary, but I do think that when we look at this map and we see how many people we have to move, either northeast, I call these basically two options. We have the shirt and pants option, where we kind of view it as the top and the bottom and deal with it that way, or we really have the domino option, where we start getting creative and it really, your mind starts hurting. And that's something that hopefully some of the people from Mendocino that are making such vehement public comment are also listening to our meetings and realizing that it is a little bit of a pickle. It's a little bit harder than they're making it sound. I mean, we're getting public comments saying that we should move the line north, even though that's directly opposite to the population changes we need to make. And I don't know what the people in Mendocino who are writing us would say if they understood that we're talking about is either doing something like that or bringing Laytonville into the 4th, or this sort of Pac-Man approach of doing everything but Laytonville. And in my opinion, that option is basically just doing the thing that we're not hearing from the people yet about doing. And if they really understood that that was one of the options, is this Pac-Man shape where we're going to basically take in everything but Laytonville in order to remedy these numbers. I doubt many people in that area would be agreeing that they should be part of the 4th. I could be wrong. And I definitely think that we need to operate at the pace at which we're able to hear from the tribes, because I too have reached out from the tribes and I don't know what I'm doing wrong, but I'm doing something wrong. And if anybody can help me do something better, I would appreciate it. But I hope that the people we're hearing from can engage with this problem we have, because I doubt, as much as I agree, I don't think we need to be moving that line on the south side. I really don't think we need to be putting Laytonville over there. And I wish that I had the data of, I've also listening to Ted Williams on our first meeting here. He's a funny guy. He says, you know, what would an algorithm do? Isn't there an algorithm that will solve this problem for us? So I've been kind of thinking about that question. Like, if there was an algorithm, if the AI could tap in and try to solve this for us, what would they do? And I'll tell you what they do. They would know where all of our phones are, right? And they would create what's called a heat map. And you'd see a heat map of how people travel, how people move around, how people sort of manifest their community of interest through their own human bodies. And I might get the worst letters from this Mendocino group to say this, but even if we keep the district line where it is, which I hope we do, like, come on, like, Fort Bragg is part of your community, and there's a lot of people commuting between those two places every day for work. And there's a lot, like, I talked to one person who did write in saying that they thought that should be different. And they brought up, and this is the last thing I'm going to say, that same sort of political organization that is the reason why we got so many letters from Mendocino. You could see parallel syntax in those letters. There are people organized there. And he said that kind of energy, he wants the line to be south because he wants that energy to be helping Fort Bragg. Because if Fort Bragg continues to lose population, I will tell you, in 2030, Mendocino will be in District 4, no question. There's nothing that's going to change that unless Fort Bragg can really have the renaissance that it deserves. So even if you don't want to be in the same district, you still got to, you know, bring some of that political energy to Fort Bragg. But yeah, and the West Hills thing, we have to focus on that too, because it's one of these same vestigial problems where it's impossible for a Homo sapien to represent that many people in that many different situations. D?
Is it feasible for an ad hoc group, for lack of a better term, to meet outside of these meetings, maybe with Leaf, and work on some maps before our next meeting? That can be, so we have them done in enough time to post them so we can share them at these meetings? Or should all of our work be done in these meetings here? Because the way I look at our schedule, we have one more meeting after this. And that's when we have to decide on maps. And we really have just gotten started in this process.
Is that a question for Charlotte, maybe?
So I think an ad hoc would be a committee focused on a smaller issue of this commission. I think I would caution against creating an ad hoc to do the job of this commission as a whole. I do think there is maybe room to add another meeting next week, and we can talk about that when we look at the schedule. And I definitely share the concern about wanting more time. I would recommend narrowing an ad hoc on drafting maps, which is the goal of this entire commission and what the entire commission was nominated to do. But I do understand the concern and frustration. So when we get maybe to that part of the agenda, we could talk about the calendar and see if there's any wiggle room for meetings and with the of course only the majority input from the commission as to wanting to take those steps. And I wanted to address, if I may, just sort of the theme of some of the comments I'm hearing, and I wanted to bring it back to the criteria for redistricting. That I completely understand the looking at this as an opportunity to enlarge democracy for the county of Mendocino, and to think about the interests of people who haven't commented. But we do have limitations with and requirements that the constitutional law and the election code is telling us that have to govern this commission and ultimately the Board of Supervisors in their decision on adopting maps. And so we have to an extent, the inertia, the public comment is a very big piece of that, the community of interest testimony. Obviously some public comment, if it's focused on is expressly focused on political concerns, would not be the basis of drawing lines, but what we have to consider is the public input in that community of interest testimony. And then finally, when we look at something, for example, District 2, as I mentioned earlier, we have limitations. We are able to have a district that has our largest city in one district based on just the population of that city. But when you look at other communities such as Humboldt County or Sonoma County, and Humboldt County isn't that far off from Mendocino County, they have a city larger than the city of Ukiah that they have to divide up. And I'm sure there are communities that want to keep the city of Eureka in one district or the city of Arcata in one district. And it might so I use that just by way of example that while there's an interest in wanting to create a unified one interest district, it isn't exactly possible within the confines of the Constitution and within the confines of the criteria we have. And so while there are folks who live in areas adjacent to districts that feel more aligned, and we certainly should consider the comments we receive from them, and you should make efforts to see if it's possible to create maps to consider that. And that comment, we may not be able to create maps that meet our required criteria. And I'll leave it at that. I don't mean to go on too long, but I want to help bring us back to the criteria, because that when we are done with this process, any challenges to this process is looking at our record, our comments, our discussions, and the input in writing that we've received so far. And so I want to caution the commission from going too far out of the bounds of what the rules we have been provided. There are limitations in any legal process, but we do have to follow them, and ultimately the board would have to adopt a map that met those requirements.
Charlotte, I did want to clarify that I, for one, was not recommending that we have an AI redistrict for us, and I was simply pointing out that so far we have received no public comment unless people start to think we're going to move their line. And so as we do this, we've sort of we're trying to take Laytonville off the table. We're trying to take Mendocino off the table. And I think that as soon as people see, for example, draft 2, if they are at all politically involved, and if they're not, then I understand the process. And if we don't receive public comment, it's not my job to sort of pretend I know what people want. But if we continue to receive public comment that basically says, don't move any of my lines, then it's hard, then it becomes just weighing all these different public comments. And I think that the people in sort of northern Covelo, splitting Round Valley tribes, I know we have seen public comment about the outskirts of Willits. You know, when we start to try to just not touch any of what we've been asked not to touch, the process is moving so fast that those next people who are now going to be concerned have less of an opportunity to express their public comment, just simply because they weren't paying attention because we hadn't shown a map yet. I also want to say one more thing, and then I'll go ahead to Paula, but I do think we should change the heading on drafts 3 and 4 to suggest that they're sort of brainstorming maps, because I think we did get a lot of confused public comment, even though they were simply brainstorming maps to try to understand what's possible, since we don't have a very interactive app like Districtor to do this with. And so I think we need to, anything that we do that is outside of the rules, because I think that's a valuable part of brainstorming, we need to demarcate it as such so that we don't confuse the public, having them think that that's a real draft map. Paula?
Okay. First of all, I just want to say a lot of the comments that are in District 5 are not just from the Mendocino village. There's, you know, a whole area below the village itself where people have these concerns. So just kind of to speak up for them. The other question I have is, one of the comments we got was a planning commissioner who did present another map. She had drawn something else. And how do we go about having that one evaluated for our criteria? Is that something that Leaf can pick up and do and then have to republish? But what's that process look like? Because it's an interesting map also.
Commissioner Farmer, if I may, is this the proposal from Beth Bosk? Because
No.
That did not come through, and I've been trying to do a contact with that person to try to get their map. You know, we got an email, but the attachment did not come through.
Come through. This one was from Diana Wiedemann.
We did get comments from Diana. Chairman Farmer, we did get comments from Diana, but we did not get a map.
Okay, because I there is one that was attached to one of the comments I looked at. So that she had drawn made some comments on that. So if we could, are we supposed to forward, make sure you have those and can look at them? I want to do the process correctly.
They should have come through the redistricting site, but I suspect if they come to Sherry, then she can distribute.
It did. Okay.
Paula, I did ask Leaf if draft number 2, I think I phrased it, was the minimum contortions that it takes to keep Laytonville in the 3rd while remedying the population problem. And if I remember correctly, he responded that yes, that is what it would take to pull that off. Am I remembering correctly? Did I understand you, Lee?
Chairman Farmer, that is correct. It keeps most of, I think, what you would consider the Laytonville community of interest within the 3rd district without making any other changes.
So Paula, I think that the map that you're talking about, as wonderful as it would be, does not sufficiently redistribute the population between 4 and 3.
Okay. That's my question. If somebody had evaluated it.
Peter?
First of all, I really appreciate all the other commissioners' comments. And also Charlotte's comments about, I think if I put myself in Charlotte's position, I would, and I'm not an attorney, I'm just an old guy who's been through this process a lot over the last 50 years. And watching people challenge redistricting is a very painful process. It rips the community up. And you do, hopefully, you want to do this in a way so that the board can adopt a plan that isn't going to be challenged in the courts. And so I just want to remind everyone that we're operating under some constraints here that make this process even more difficult and hypercharged than it really should be. If we had started, say, 3 months ago with the final census data adjusted, and we'd had 3 months to draw maps and play with these numbers and suggest different configurations of districts, I would then be a lot more sympathetic to the notion of doing or considering some radical redrawing of district boundaries. But we don't. We actually don't have that luxury. We're under a very tight time frame, and the decisions that we make in turn will be passed on to the Board of Supervisors as recommendations and be part of the public record in terms of what they considered in making their decisions for the final district lines. And if it does get challenged in court, the problem that I would have if I was Charlotte or legal counsel representing the county is if there isn't a really substantial body of evidence to support a radical redrawing of district boundaries, it makes it that much harder to defend it. And so I just want to, I hope that my fellow commissioners won't lose sight of the desire to do the right thing for the county, but also make sure that we take consideration that in doing the right thing, we better be on very firm ground, very firm evidentiary ground. And the more change that we advocate in our district boundary lines, the more susceptible they could be to legal challenge, a challenge that would be expensive for the county to defend, or potentially very expensive for the county to defend. And I hope that when I offer that comment, it's just a caution. I'm not telling people to think one way or another, but just to consider that if we had more time and more data, we could do a better job. That's not without, I'm firmly convinced, but we don't. We have a certain amount of data and a certain amount of public input, and we have to use that as our core basis for what we do. And that's something I hope we're all considering as we get down to this very tight time frame. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to make that statement to you. I hope it comes across in the sense of a positive contribution. Thank you.
It does.
Peter, I want to challenge you a little bit, because I agree we should make as little change as necessary. If I look at the map we have now, and I look at draft 2, which is the minimum that it takes to between the boundaries of 3 and 4 to not include Laytonville, that's a huge boundary line change. I mean, that's a really big one. When we haven't heard from anybody along those lines yet, which is why that's what we're doing. And I understand, Charlotte, we're not going to be making any decisions if we don't hear from anybody in there. Then that draft 2 of what I wrote Leaf, and I know he hasn't had time to do this yet, is I would like to see what the shirt of draft 2 looks like with the pants of draft 1. So that would be, and those are the 2 that actually fit the numbers. It doesn't include Laytonville, but it does include moving Hopland. But that's a pretty radically redrawn map, because it looks to me like it takes radically redrawing the map in order to just deal with our our relatively small population problem, if we're not going to do anything controversial. Am I right?
Yeah.
It's almost like this. It's either radically redrawing the map or doing something radical. Seem like the two options here. Because the map that Paula mentioned isn't redrawing the map enough. That would be the perfect thing if that would have worked.
It may be a good idea for us to defer this discussion any further until after the maps have actually been presented to us in our agenda.
So do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment on this item.
Okay, so let's move on to item number 4 and review the current district boundaries for equal population.
Yes, if I may, Chairman Farmer, I'm going to share a screen here, and I'm going to briefly, as much as possible, give you the current situation. Again, this may be a bit redundant. Let's see if I can do this. Share screen 2. Again, this is the current supervisorial districts that were established in 2011. The numbers here, as the numbers in all the maps, will be using the 2020 census data as adjusted by the state, which we're required to use. And you'll notice that the population of the adjusted data is 91,000. Now I got to zoom in, 624. Let me do that for everyone's benefit. And we've given the current population, the 2020 population for each of the districts as they currently stand. And then we've given you the average population that we're sort of shooting for. So we want to balance each district as close as we can to the average, which is 18,325. You notice on this map, there are 3 districts, districts 1, 2, and 5, that currently are within that, with close to that average. The 2 that are not are District 3 and 4. Also on every map, you're going to find the other statistics that are important for you to look at. This is the deviation from the average. So here, the percentage of deviation from each of these districts. What we have done in the past, the county has tried to shoot for 3% or less deviation from the average. So you can see District 1, 2, and 5 are all under that 3%. The criteria is to be less than 10% between the least populated district and the most populated district. And you'll see here that currently we're 14.7% variation. So that's too much variation. For each draft map, you'll see the same statistics to guide you in how you're doing in balancing the population. There's been a lot said about the 5th district and making that smaller. But just for the record, you should be informed that actually the 3rd district is right now the largest district by area in the county. And there's a lot of talk about Mendocino. It should be pointed out that the population of the 5th district, as it currently stands, is okay. And if you considered moving Mendocino into the 4th district, that would solve the 4th district's population problem. It just transfers it to the 5th district. So then you're going to have to look for an area where you can grab another 1,000 people and add it to the 5th district. And of course, that would do nothing to solve the problem of the 3rd district. That's kind of the quandary that we're in. And that kind of sets the stage for the next draft maps. So that's all I have on that subject. If there are any questions.
Dee, go ahead.
Lee, to just clarify that the little changes in the lines of the districts, especially like the one that's really most noticeable is District 2, I assume that's because of the change in the census blocks?
That's correct.
Okay.
This represents the best match fit of blocks to our current district lines. It's not a mirror image.
Peter?
Lee, thank you for that. But and you may have supplied this, but I don't think I've seen it. And if you did, I apologize for asking for it a second time. But on the other maps that we're going to be considering that you've posted, you've also included a table that shows the distribution of the voting age population, and in particularly the distribution of the racial minority ethnic groups by district as well. Do we have a table like that for this current map?
Well, there's 2 tables, one that goes along with the district boundaries themselves. As you change them, add blocks back and forth, it will give you the racial and ethnic makeup of the district based on the adjusted census data. There is a table that goes with each map that supplies the citizen voting age data from the American Community Survey for each draft map. And I guess your question is, do I have that for this map?
Yes, that's right.
But I would have to take a little time to search for it and to bring it up.
The reason that I actually think that's important, at least from my standpoint, is because as I look at the alternative maps that we're going to be looking at later on, and we do have that table that's attached to each one of those maps, I'm going to be interested in looking at how changes in the district boundaries impact the distribution of voting age population in that table as well. And so I need a baseline, which I believe would be that for this map. So if it's possible between now and the next meeting for you to send that out, I would appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comment? Okay, and is there any public comment on this item?
There is no public comment on this item.
Okay. Let's move on to agenda item number 6, consideration of maps based on community input. Leaf can show us the rest of the drafts.
This is draft one. It was made as more of a concept map. It does several things. I'll run through these really quickly, and then we can go back to individual maps. This map primarily was to solve the problem between the 3rd and 4th district. It does that by including Laytonville into the 4th district, which is not a very popular move. It will not be looked at kindly by the folks in Laytonville, and I understand that because I was here when they fought to move themselves into the 3rd district, and I think it, there's a good reason why it should be in the 3rd district as a community of interest. However, when you look at the population problem, which is the main goal of redistricting, it is an elegant solution. This map does several other things, although it's hard to see at this level. It does take the boundary of the 5th district along the coast and moves it up to Road 409, which was one of the requests. And it does take some area that was in the 1st district that's contiguous to the city of Ukiah and moved it into the 2nd district. And it added everything south of Ukiah, east of Highway 101 into the 1st district, thus making the 5th district somewhat smaller in size, which was one of our requests. And one of the other requests was to make sure that we included all of Hopland in at least one district. Well, it is in one district now, it's in the 5th district. But to look at making the 5th district smaller, then what I tried to do was at least include all of this Hopland census designated place within that District 1. So this does meet the numbers as far as balancing the population. You'll see that they're all under 3%, and we're well within the 10% limit. And I'm going to go through all 4 of these maps really quickly, and then can go back to any one that each one or a particular one that the commissioners would like to comment on. Draft 2 was originally looking at how do we balance the population with leaving Laytonville in the 3rd district. It does accomplish that. You can see where here's the town of Laytonville, here's a surrounding area. Some of these areas up in here may consider themselves part of the Laytonville community of interest. But in this particular map, they were trying to move the 4th district boundary east enough with leaving Laytonville in the 3rd district. And at the same time, meeting the population requirements. Take a look at here. It's pretty close. District 4 is still a little bit under, but you can see down here, we're well within that 10% margin. So it does achieve that goal. And it had a limited goal. So one of the further comments on this were sent in to, I know Kyle talked about looking at incorporating some of the aspects to the south of the county that were incorporated into draft 1. Peter had also asked to take a look at that. And that's something that you'll see at your next meeting, that we've done a few of those changes. We can also take a look at any fine tuning of these maps that you want tonight. But let me just finish here going through these draft maps before we go to the other application. Okay, draft 3 obviously leaves Laytonville in the 3rd district. It brought the northern boundary along the coast between the 4th and 5th district quite a bit north. And as you can see, it follows let me add another layer to this really quickly so that you can see one of the criteria that this particular model was shooting for. You see this particular draft was trying to follow watershed boundaries, and it does a reasonably good job of doing that. All of the Eel River watershed would be in the 3rd district. And the 4th district would follow coastal watershed boundaries. You know, the Russian River watershed is still split among a couple of different watersheds. I mean, districts, and the majority of the South Coast and Navarro watersheds would be in the 5th district. It takes in I keep the wrong one. It takes in areas to the south of Ukiah and the north of Ukiah, as well as the Western Hills. You're going out here where Springs Road quite a ways, a Low Gap, and out Boonville Road, Highway 253. So it's including a lot more area to the west and a little bit to the south and north. Again, truthfully, most people in this area would probably consider Ukiah as their community of interest. The difficulty is in balancing the numbers. And you can see we have one district that is within the range, while all other 4 are quite a bit out of the range. And we're having a disparity between the least populated and most populated of over 35%. So that would not adhere to that particular criteria. District 4 was a concept map that had a couple of options, and this was only the first option. And in this particular scenario, the line between the 4th district and the 5th district was brought down to Big River, basically, as well as Laytonville being placed in the 4th district. But one of the options was, of course, to try to look at this map without Laytonville in the 4th district, which on one single map, I'm not able to do that. I would have to make more than one map, but I just want to refer you to the fact that there were some options here to play around with in that particular description. This map included everything east of 101, including Hopland census designated place in District 1. Unlike a couple other examples, it left the northern part of District 1 as is, where the other two more followed a watershed boundary, which would have put Van Arsdale and the mountainous area north of Potter Valley into the 3rd district. This one keeps it as is. But it did extend District 1 out along Highway 101, just south of Willits, and increased, I keep doing that, increased Ukiah a little bit to the south and a little bit to the north, basically up to about Lover's Lane to the north, and down to just above Stip Lane here in the south. As with the other version, draft 3, we have some problems balancing the population. In this particular version, District 1 and District 3 fall within the range, roughly, and District 2, 4, and 5 are too far out of the range, resulting in a 33.9% variation between the least populated and most populated. So, that's the difficulty in when you look at the map and say, well, logically, this is a community of interest, and logically, this is a community of interest. Getting back to the first draft, you can make the major change, and then you can do a little fine tuning. And this is not unusual. This is what 10 years ago, your counterparts on the 2011 Redistricting Commission had to face the same problems and realize that that's not to say a radical revision of the district boundaries could not work. But what you end up is trying to go a little way towards meeting what the public comment would like us to accomplish.
Leif, what was the goals of this map here?
Well, there were several options on this map. I think this was, I tried to incorporate Mary's descriptions of what she pointed out would like to see on a map. And, but again, she looked at it, well, what does it look like with Laytonville in the 4th district? What does it look like if you had Laytonville outside of the 4th district, say in the 3rd district? If Laytonville was out of was back in the 3rd district, you would probably bring down the numbers here in the 4th district to probably within range, because including Mendocino and its area of subdivisions right in here, you roughly have 1,000 people you're putting back into District 4. But putting Laytonville back in the 3rd district, you're still going to have the 3rd district with too many people. And we can take a look at the application with the blocks and look at that if you want, and see how it changes the numbers. So those are the 4 draft maps that we had published in time for this meeting, where we had the required 5-day notice to the public for them to be able to view these maps and comment on them. So if you want to take a look at any of these drafts and play around with the areas, we can do that at this time. Or if you have any questions on any of the drafts, I can try to answer those. And also the commissioners who suggested these different drafts might want to comment on them or tell me if I did a good job of trying to meet how they described it or not. I'm open to changes and any comments.
Peter?
Yeah, I want to talk about the tables a little bit. I looked at the tables and, you know, first, I guess I want to say this, Mr. Chairman, Kyle. I'm going to call you Kyle rather than Mr. Chairman. It just seems so formal. So pardon me if you're offended. I'll change my language. But so Kyle, I'm sort of, if I heard you right, I think I'm on the same page with you. That what I'd like to see is another map, and I sent a request to Leaf earlier this week requesting that we take a look at a map that incorporates the changes in draft number 1 for districts 5, 2, 1, and 3. Although I would have some questions about that notch on Potter Valley. I just want to get that my head wrapped around what that really means. But along with the changes in draft number 2, have the changes between District 3 and 4. I think if we combined the elements of those 2 maps, we could effectively address the issue of Hopland, and at the same time resolve the population imbalances between District 3 and District 4. So I would speak, if that's what your intent was, in the comments you made earlier, I think I would like to see a map like that as well and see what that means. And I hope that would be clear enough for Leaf so that he could do that, because both draft 1 and draft 2 maps meet the overall population requirements, and they're pretty close on the district by district requirements as well. So I think there's a sweet spot between combining those 2 maps that might work. And then we could fiddle around with margins just a little bit. I think we'd get to a pretty good place. But one of the things that I would like to see us attain, and I'm going to refer to the table for draft number 2. When you look at, can you bring that up, Leaf, by any chance? Or somebody?
Yes. I'm loading it now. Wrong one.
And Peter, we both did, I think, recommend the exact or request the exact same thing. So we're.
Yeah. But can I get the table for draft number 2, Leaf?
I'm working on it right now.
Oh, okay. It shifted screens and I thought, oh, that's not what I was looking for, but I'll be patient. It's hard for me.
So this is the table for draft 2 with the total population. So you have your total population, you have the deviation from the average, you have Hispanic, not Hispanic, one race, white, black, American Indian, Asian, Hawaiian, Pacific Islander, other, and 2 or more races. This
okay. The population of the Native American, can we highlight? Right. Okay. So of all the maps that I was looking at that met the 10% requirement, I think I got this right. I could be wrong. Yes, that met the 10% requirement. The second, this map, I thought was the one that was the most sensitive to not breaking up the Native American population into two districts. And in the map table that was sent out, the number is a little different from that number because I think we were looking at the numbers for American Community Survey.
Citizen voting age.
Yeah, a voting age. And
Are we
what it
looking at the third district table right now? I can't see the edge.
I'm looking
I can't
at-
see the left-hand side of, there we go. Okay.
If you look at District 3, it has by far the largest number of Native American in that district. It retains it in that district. And that appealed to me because when I looked at the other maps, the dispersion of that community was far greater. And so I thought that the advantage of, and I suspect it's because while Kyle, you pointed out map draft number 2 does look a little bit like Pac-Man trying not to eat Laytonville. It does respect the Native American population and keep it in one district. And so that is one of the advantages of draft map number 2 is that it doesn't break that population up. And if you look at the tables in regard to American Indians population, the only one that does a better job is, and I apologize that I can't put this up on the screen, but I think it was, yeah, it was draft map number 3, but it only increased the Native American population in District 3 by 48. So 1,000 is pretty close to the highest. None of the other district map proposals come even close to concentrating the Native American population into one district. And that's why I wanted to point that out to the other commissioners. One of the advantages of draft number 2 is that it respects the Native American population. And I know that is an important consideration for Mary, at least. And it's one for me as well. But so I would refer the other commissioners to those tables to look at that and consider what that means as you consider these maps. And then, like I said, I think Kyle and I, we're both on basically the same page. What we're looking for is a draft map number 5 to take a look at. We don't have it here today, but if I could give some feedback, it would be, I like the way District 3 and 4 in draft number 2 are laid out. And I like the way District 1, 2, and 5 are laid out in draft map number 1. So if we could get sort of a merger of those two, I think we'd be looking at something that would satisfy a lot of our criteria and be worth taking a close look at. I know I'm
Peter,
using
Charlotte has her hand raised. I think she's going to remind us that we're not supposed to be looking at racial data as our redistrict. But maybe she might have something to interject here. She's had her hand raised for a while.
Why wouldn't we look at it if it's in the tables that are submitted to us?
If I may, Chair Farmer, I can elaborate a little bit, and I think you're right. I raised my hand to explain. So first, just to answer Commissioner McNamee's question, why do we have the tables of the demographic data if we're not to consider them? the statute on redistricting requires all draft maps, any draft map, and not just what is considered and recommended, but any map that any member of the public creates, to also show the demographic data based on the citizen voting age. And this is to provide the indicators of whether we have a Voting Rights Act compliance issue. And as I explained earlier, we do not in Mendocino County have a population of minority that is concentrated geographically in one area to a number that would, of the citizen voting age population, that would be or could comprise more than 50% of our ideal district size. Now, when it comes to, if we had such a thing, we are allowed to consider race and in redistricting, because normally considering race and drawing lines or ethnicity, any protected class, would violate the Constitution and would be considered what's called racial gerrymandering. Even if your goal or your intent is thinking in your mind, you have pure intent in why you're considering it, meaning that you think it will empower or it will be what is preferred by a minority community. That isn't something that we can consider looking at population statistics as a percentage. We have to, well, that being said, race or ethnicity can be a factor when we're looking at the smaller building blocks of communities of interest. So if looking at any of a map proposals, or when you're drawing lines, if you notice and the public tells you, oh, this particular map is dividing my community that is, perhaps in an area of concentrated, where there is a concentration of minorities who share common socioeconomic or cultural interests and share a community of interest in that they attend the same ceremonies or locate. And keep in mind, this is tied to the map. So that's where it may be that you want to consider the public input on dividing the smaller building blocks of our districts. But we do not and cannot consider the percentages and concentrate percentages of minorities to one district as a defining characteristic for drawing lines. And I hope that makes sense. Let me know if you have any other questions.
I don't have any problem with what you just said, but my point was that it is a community of interest in the 3rd district. And that's what I've heard from Mary. And I tend to think I agree with her on that. Now, maybe I'm misunderstanding what Mary was saying, but I think her concern was that that is a community of interest in the 3rd district, and redrawing the lines to move Laytonville into 4th district would essentially break up that community of interest. So that's why I'm trying to point this out, not because I am interested in the particular voting block of people, but that's the date that's been submitted to me. But I'll move on. I understand your point, and therefore I'll surrender the mic. Thank you.
The remainder of my time, Mary. Wait, can I just ask a quick question before Mary? Because it's directly related to what Peter was just talking about. Leaf, does draft number 2 keep Round Valley Reservation whole?
Technically, no. There's some people, obviously, they're going to consider the valley floor as a community of interest, and it maintains that. But the reservation boundary itself is rather large. And, if you were of the opinion that the whole reservation with your community of interest, then this would be splitting that in two pieces, irrespective of population numbers.
If I remember correctly, many of those blocks were quite low population. So it could be possible to have something very similar to draft number to the shirt section of draft number 2, while perhaps remedying that. If we do receive public comment by the next meeting, that is something that there is a concern to achieve.
Well, we can look at fine tuning that right now if you want and see how that affects the numbers.
Let's do that after we hear from Mary, please.
Well, I understand what Charlotte's saying, and I agree. Yet at the same time, we are not to divide communities of interest. And given the native population of Laytonville, if you cut it out of 3, you are doing a significant division of that community interest. The other thing, and I know it's not brought up a lot because I worked for the community clinic at Mendocino, the connections between Laytonville down through the Mendocino Rural Health Clinics, Howard Hospital, and Ukiah Hospital are intense. And there are liaisons between providers and organizations that have agreements of working together. So there's a tradition there of the practitioners also, and the population being very used to, like I saw a lot of Laytonville patients for a woman's health consult in Willis. But I think the native try and develop, grow your own, but then you don't break up what seems to be developing either. Thank you. And I rather like draft 2 too. The top part of it.
We should just all cut our pieces of paper in half. Does that count if does that count as published? Indeed, I do think that if there does seem to be some consensus around what we could call draft 5, at least as a starting point, I think that there's possibilities to, from there, look at how to remedy the Western Hills of Ukiah or other aspects of Ukiah within the boundaries of percent deviation. But that we do seem to be at least hinting towards something. My point earlier was that might only be because we haven't heard from the people in the other parts that we. Paula, and then let's dig into this Round Valley question on the top of draft 2.
Okay, mine was a simple question, and maybe I'm missing something here. I know at one point there was discussion about Hopland feeling more connected to District 1, to the inland area. And while there are, I see what draft 1 and draft 4 have Hopland in there, is the Hopland population large enough or small enough that somehow couldn't be also considered? And have we had a lot of comments from the Hopland area people about their connection to either District 4 or District 1? I haven't seen many, but
I was I was zoomed with the Hopland MAC meeting right before this, so hopefully we will be hearing from Hopland. And that's, Paula, what you're describing is exactly what apparently Peter and I independently wrote to the Leaf, which is taking the where's draft 2? Taking the bottom of draft 1 and the top of draft 2 and combining them There you go. Leaf, can we look at Grand Valley Reservation?
Sure. So if you wanted to get the whole reservation within one district, without cutting the valley floor in half, you pretty much have to put that back in the 3rd district. And we could take a look and see what the numbers look like roughly. So roughly that's how it's going to change the numbers. And we look at the deviations. They're not really that bad. Only one is over 3 and by not that much. Now that's given this particular version of map number 2. So it is possible not to split that. If we go back to the, it looks a bit like that.
That's a little less Pac-Man-y, isn't it?
It does make it a little bit more compact, yes.
So I would like to add that to my request for the shirt and pants map draft 5. Peter, do you agree?
I'd like to look at the numbers, and not on the fly tonight. I won't agree to that, but not because I want to be obstinate, but I'd just like to see the numbers, and then think about them. But in concept, I actually like that, because it makes the districts more compact. And you know what, I will make the argument that I was looking at last time we met was that there is the borderline issue of people who live along the border between northern Mendocino County and Humboldt and Trinity County as well. Now, that little jog that you see at the top of our map is, I believe, where Trinity County intersects. And there's some argument I think that you could make for this particular map simply on the same argument. And I tried to do this week in the interim. I actually tried to dig down and look at the maps and look at the roads that were running through that borderline area between northern Mendocino County and Humboldt and Trinity. And there are actually quite a few roads that come across from the southern parts of both of those counties into northern Mendocino, which look like they would be the roads that people who lived in those areas would probably travel on in order to go from their place of residence there to get services in other places. And this particular map, I think sort of honors that, although what it would do is it would break that community into two different areas. One that would probably be mostly people traveling from Mendocino through Trinity County, and then maybe to Humboldt, or people who live in Mendocino in the very north end of the county that then drive roads across into southern Humboldt and then connect Highway 101. So, but that area just to the west of the line that you've got there, most of those roads, as far as I could figure out, yeah, they seem to be connecting to Highway 101 over towards Leggett, in that area. And it seemed to me that there was probably a fairly high community of interest and affinity between that area and Leggett and southern Humboldt. So in concept, that doesn't seem to be this particular proposed map, as long as it doesn't have an adverse impact or a significant adverse impact in the population disparity, then I think it's probably workable. I hope that answers your question, Kyle.
Paula? Paula, are you trying to unmute or to unraise your hand? Oh, Mary?
Both.
Oh,
There we
both.
go.
Okay. Did you want to go ahead?
I just. Paula?
Yes.
Okay. Did you want to go ahead, Paula?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so Mary, please go ahead.
I like, forgive me for being somewhat geographically challenged, but does this include, I like holding that reservation in one area, and I like how it doesn't pack man so much. But does this include Laytonville in District 3?
Yes, it does for the most part. So let's take a look at that. Let me add some data to this. Give you a better picture. This is the Rancheria in Laytonville, by the way. That's why you see that there. I'll just turn this off here for now. So here's the main town area of Laytonville. And here's Highway 101 running through here. But you have a large, of course, residential area out here that would consider themselves Laytonville as well. Turn off that. I'm going to zoom out a little bit just to show you where that line would cross. So you have a large agricultural area here. And then you're going out Branscombe Road out here. But you can see it's pretty tight around the area of Laytonville. For instance, let's see if we can identify something up in here. Here's Highway 101. So you don't get too far out of Laytonville before you start getting into the 4th District. And that's just, again, trying to get enough population to balance it between the 2 districts. But I think it does a very good job of getting the core of Laytonville in one district. Let's see what it looks like with census designated place. Okay, there's the census designated place boundary. So we're not splitting that. And we're actually including a bit more around the area of Laytonville that would be included in the community of interest. Does that answer your question there?
Yes, thank you.
And how does this fit with the description
Am I
of
getting the
Laytonville?
feeling we may have the shirt?
You have a feeling we may have the what?
You may have your shirt.
Oh yeah.
You know, one of the things of using this boundary is it uses the Eel River as sort of a natural border. And most of your roads coming up here are Spy Rock, Bell Springs, Registered Guest Road. They access other areas through Highway 101. So pretty much there's not a lot of roads that cross the river up here in this northern part of Mendocino County. So a lot of your roads on this side of the river are going back to Round Valley, Mendocino Pass Road, and Minor Road, and Highway 162. So it is sort of a natural barrier.
So Leaf, could we go to the pants with this map and look at the Hopland question?
Would be the southern half of the county, and we can certainly do that.
I think the shirt and pants thing comes from one of my kids' books that you change the pages. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
I'm also, Hopland Mac asked me to ask you in the census numbers, what are you, how many people do you consider to be in Hopland in that whole area? And perhaps I can actually ask Paula a question related to that. Is there a general understanding of the difference between census population and actual population? in terms of some sort of coefficient?
General understanding between whom? All the people in the world? I mean, in the,
No, in the county.
we had,
Or-
in the county. We did, we do have a listing of all the different census tracts and how many people ended up responding, if that's what you're doing. And census tracts are, as have been described before, they're not really contiguous upon something else. They're not zip codes and they're not block areas. So they're kind of a, they had to be at least a 2,500 person population, and that's how some of those census tracts got drawn. Did I answer your question?
I guess that
Or did I
I've
totally-
heard from many people, including the sheriff, that there's a lot more people in the county than we sort of officially can understand. So I'm curious. I know that
Well-
Hopland Mac perceives Hopland as including 6,000 people. And I'm wondering how that correlates to what we're calling Hopland, and also if some of that
Well,
difference could be because of just the actual versus official numbers.
People could feel very well that they have more population in a certain area. The census was based on the response they got from areas. You had a low of, Mendocino County was about 56% response rate. And then from there, they did some extrapolations. So yeah, but we tried very hard to get people to be willing to respond and participate, and it was difficult in some areas. The reservations were very difficult, and people living outside of the cities, up in some of the more hinterlands, people who wanted to be not on the grid and not counted. This is the result of that, So,
And yeah, no,
yeah,
I
we didn't
totally
have a
realize
great
that.
census count.
I totally understand that. I was curious because it seems to me that their perception of how many people were there is different than what we're going to see now. So I was just curious if that was part of why.
Well, it could very well be. That had been a discussion when we were doing census work. People have different ideas, but we could only count who we could count. And then the feds also sent in their tests of counters and tried to get them to respond. And that was a difficult challenge in this county. But they have to use some numbers. They have to come up with some justification for thinking of why their numbers are higher than those that were reported and then extrapolated.
Yes, I was just asking you so I can be ready to explain why the geographic region would make sense even if it doesn't hit the numbers that they think it should. So, but let's go ahead and see what Leaf has for us.
Well, Chairman Farmer, if I may help answer that question. The Census Bureau has a consistent process to count people, and it's a multi-level process. The first part of that is to have people self-census, and there are many aspects after that where people are sent out into the field to check that. Also, you have to be careful that census data is counts people where they live 6 or more months out of the year. So if you have people in your area that only live there part of the year, they're being counted somewhere else. So there's a lot of misconception, especially in high touristed areas and second home areas, that how many people live there, as opposed to how many people are actually counted there. So it's like any other process, it's a measurement. And what the Census Bureau tries to do is, here's the criteria in the process. This is how we counted people. If you use a different process, you're going to come up with different numbers. So it's a measurement of a point in time. So on that date or in that time period, This is how many people we counted. And again, it's a moving target. Before and after that point, there could be less or more people. So it's like measuring any scientific measurement that you try to do, you have to set up the criteria and do it the same time, the same way every time to compare results. So given for example, the American Community Survey, which is a survey, it's done in a completely different manner. It's a different measurement. It was predicting that our 2020 population would be less than it was in 2010. I didn't think that would happen, but I didn't think it would grow very much. I mean, the trends are there. You can see the trends from one census to the next and the inter-census estimates that we weren't going to grow by very much. But my feeling is that we should have grown, and that's what the census count actually told us we did. So, given different methodologies, you can come up with completely different figures. So when someone says, is this the real population? Or, is it the Census Bureau population? If somebody's done a better job at counting people, I'm ready to hear it. But to say that the Census Bureau data is wrong, just because you think otherwise, is not applying the same methodology. It's a different measurement. You're not going to come up with the same results. I don't know if that helps you in that answer, but that's how I would answer that.
Well, there's a chance I don't even have a question. I just think I do. But if we can look at what that addition to District 1 would look like, and then how many people that is, I will be better able to answer the question that I think I have now.
This is a bit bigger area. It may take a little bit more, but we can do it roughly.
In draft map number 1, what was the line that you used?
I use Highway 101 up until you get to the Hopland Census Designated Place. In this case, you can see where District 1 is now over. And to remedy that in map 1 takes in this particular area here out of District 1 and puts it into District 2. I can show you what that would do as far as numbers go.
Is that what you did in draft 1?
Correct.
It's hard to tell on the smallest parts of these.
Exactly. It's the scale of the map isn't conducive to that. But.
So those were then put into 2?
Correct.
Oh. I thought D was going to get mad at me because I thought we were going to have to put those into 5. Cool.
So we still have we're getting a little bit too much into District 2, but still kind of close. District 5 has probably a little bit too many people. Why is District 5 have too many people?
Or too few, right?
Too few, yeah. Oh,
But what is our?
I know why.
We're getting into what Charlotte was warning us about. We're at like 8.8. Between
one of the other things we did in draft 1 was taking this area up in here. This is Van Arsdale and the mountains north of Potter Valley, and put those into the 3rd district. That would reduce some of the numbers in the 1st district, not by a lot, but by a little. The other item that was changed was over here. That. These blocks were put into the 5th district.
Which district, which are those?
This is the area going up to Road 409 and staying outside of the Casper census designated place. So I'll zoom out a little bit. So here's the Surfwood subdivision, and the current district goes right through here. And this area up in here, Road 409 area, in the draft 1 was added to the 5th district. And you can see our numbers are quite a bit better. Now we have the 4th district not doing too well. So that's because we took out that area. So we have to do some balancing here, try to maybe balance these two somewhat better than it is. Okay, they're a little bit over 3, but they're pretty much the same. These two are a little bit over 3. District 3 is looking pretty good. So, we'd have to look at how this works in how that balances the population in from the least to the most populated districts.
Peter, I see that you have a hand raised.
Yeah, I'm just, I guess I'm growing a little concerned here, trying to do this on the fly tonight. And we haven't published maps for people to comment on.
Well, these aren't drafts. You can think of these as concepts.
Maybe Charlotte. Okay.
No, I think, Peter, I think that's the whole purpose of the meeting, right? To work these things through, and then they're not published drafts. But Charlotte, please comment.
I was just going to say, you can in the meeting do this kind of live review and looking at lines. The concern in terms of public comment is once you land on an area that you want to consider as a draft and talk further at the next meeting. This is sort of the live discussion that would be anticipated by an advisory redistricting commission. Our only concern is that after today's meeting, you'd want to then publish various drafts for consideration at the next meeting, publishing them to provide the public an opportunity to comment on those, brainstorming types of drafts of maps. But it's perfectly reasonable to have discussions about the lines and looking at population statistics during a live meeting, and that's totally reasonable. Earlier in the proceedings, before we had enough time to have the demographic data that we need for publishing maps, we had to wait in the early part of the process. We couldn't do some of this live discussion until we had some initial maps drawn, and that may be the confusion there.
Mary?
That goes to my hesitancy. You asked my question about whether I would agree to the changes that we made at the upper end to draft 2 up by the border. And I don't think that it's appropriate for us to be saying whether we agree or not.
Well, I was asking you because we had both requested a map, but at this point, it sounds like this is solving that problem. I thought we were going to have to, formally request a map from Leaf, and it seemed expedient to request the same one if we were both thinking along the same lines. But at this point, it's kind of moot. Mary?
Just as an aside, Potter Valley is very much a community of interest. And if you're going to take part of Potter Valley and move it up to 3, you may have some serious discussion in Potter Valley. So I would look at that closely. And that's just because I have ties to that valley, and it's a pretty tight community. So it may be hard to kind of break up that part in upper Potter Valley because of the ranches. The other thing is, I think what we have to do is you have to publish proposed changes coming out of this meeting for the public so that they can then comment on what we've developed during this meeting. Thank you.
And I would just add, I guess part of the problem I'm having with that discussion is the reason that we're having to change the boundary line between the 4th and the 5th is because we're changing the boundary line between the 5th and the 1st. And that causes me some pause and some concern.
Peter,
It's like-
I think that all of our public comments were requesting that the boundary move north. Am I right?
No, I don't believe that's true at all. Actually, there was
But the-
quite a few people who commented that they didn't want to see the boundary change at all. There were a few people who mentioned Road 409, but I don't believe there was any kind of consensus about changing the boundary line that currently runs through Russian Gulch. And there was quite a few comments from people in Mendocino that didn't want to see any kind of a change. And so I'm a little concerned about that. And as I said, what concerns me about it is what's the justification for doing that? Well, you don't have the problem until you make that adjustment down in Hopland. And that's a concern.
D?
I think this is a good work. This is good work for us in taking into consideration the comments that we did receive. We did receive comments that Hopland wanted to be, felt they should be an entire community, not split by 101 and put into 2 different districts. So this is just an option to solve that problem. And then the changes between 4 and 5, as Leaf said, is because we took some away here, we have to put some more in up there. So I'm not really, I think this is a good draft here to, I think in the 4 that we have that were shared up until this point, I think we have to get rid of 3 and 4 and keep 1 and 2. And now this one becomes another draft that is within the parameters. And I personally don't agree with Peter. I don't see a problem with us making this change between 4 and 5 because we tried to accommodate Hopland's wishes with this map. And I think this is a good option to consider. That's all. Thanks.
It also, I realized that Leaf is even more brilliant than I thought he was. And I think that the purpose of draft 4 is to be able to play with Mary's ideas.
Yeah.
And at first
I
I was
agree.
like,
Draft
what is
3 was my idea.
thing?
Draft 3 was me. That was just going by watersheds and then trying to figure
Yeah.
out what to do with, because you don't know if it's viable until you see the numbers. And
It's
like
so
we
great
kick
that
them
we
out
have
because
that.
they're not viable. You have to see the numbers before you know if it'll actually work. So that's why I'm saying, okay, we'll get draft 3 was mine. So let's, it doesn't work. So we need to come up with another plan. So, and I agree with you that half a part of map 2 and half of map 1 were good. We're moving in a good direction. And I think this is a good compromise between those 2. So, yeah.
Mary?
I think, you have to, and I know, Peter, what you're saying, but I think we're also not just looking at arbitrarily moving. We are looking at watershed and we're looking at common economic interest and common interest in agriculture when you're looking at making this change. So we have some justification for considering this change. This isn't just moving it over just because we want to. You can justify some of this. And I think we're a combination of holding and not disturbing too much and also innovating a bit. Thank you.
I have to say that as long as I've lived in Mendocino as a farmer, this is and being part of the Farm Bureau, Hopland being part of the first has been part of the conversation ever since the 2000, as long as I've been here. I know a lot of the tasting rooms in Hopland are Potter Valley and Ukiah farmers and Hopland farmers, but there's people that literally drive between their places in Hopland and Potter Valley every single day, and Redwood Valley and Ukiah. So even though we haven't received a lot of letters, Mendocino has incredible political organization. And I don't think that they do. I mean, we should all be learning from them. I would honestly, so maybe somebody could write like a public comment as to how they pulled all that off. But but that I do think that we have to look at all of the comments, and that the way I read them, there was interest, perhaps not consensus interest, but I don't think that moving that line a little bit north goes against the general feeling of those comments.
I agree.
And the fact that we were actually able to put a little bit more of District 2 into District 2 is even better.
Mhm.
And Kyle, you're talking about moving the boundary to Road 409 on the coast, above the village of Mendocino and up to 409. That's the boundary you're talking about?
Yeah, I was surprised that was brought up as sort of a negative consequence of moving Hopland. I actually, from my reading of the public comments, viewed that as sort of a positive side effect of the Hopland move, in terms of bringing things into within the community of interest that have been expressed to us. But I am not familiar.
Okay, and in draft. Okay. And then my other question about draft 1, because I kind of agree with Peter, there are pieces pieces of each one. My note that I took for myself said in draft 1, Laytonville would move to the west to be in District 4, but were we also talking about seeing if we can get it back over to District 3, where I'm sure most of those people would prefer? And I do agree with Mary, knowing healthcare, that central corridor really is where a lot of people get their healthcare and I gotta fly around here, and do their shopping and a lot of the rest of their business. So it seemed to me to fit well there. So I would, in District 4, they need to be back in 3.
Follow. Leaf pulled up the map. So what section are you talking about?
One of the notes I took for myself when we were going over draft 1 was Laytonville being put into District 4. And did we finally put it back in District 3?
Yeah.
Yeah, the map we've been working off, we've been modifying draft 2. So we started off on draft 2 with Laytonville in. So far, if I could kind of rehash, I feel like we've solved the Round Valley split, which I personally was going to be pushing hard against. And while looking at racial data might not be a good way to go about it, I think that looking at the reservation itself and trying to keep the reservation whole is, even if we haven't received a letter, there's no question that that's a community of interest, because it is a self-contained place. And then we, on the same map, now have some of Hopland. I do think that there are people within Hopland who are probably going to, if they look at this map, say that it's not sufficient. And I would point out that there would have to be sort of a choice between putting all of, if that's what you consider all of Hopland in the 5th, or this much of what others would consider Hopland in the 1st. And that's something for Hopland to look at together. And then we also moved the boundary a little bit north by a few census designated places along a road that people on the coast seem to be very aware of which road that was.
Yes.
That was considered a natural boundary, which roads being a natural boundary is one of the criteria. So, and we also put a little bit of
just on the other side of
sort of flat, very populated land, as urban as Mendocino County gets, into District 2, which was a really important thing.
Those follow my notes. So, okay.
So this is Peter. Let me raise my hand.
Go ahead, Peter. It also brings you to the top of my screen. Otherwise, you're not there.
Yeah. You know, the other major deviation in draft map number 1 is the exclusion of the Potter Valley area from District 1 and its inclusion in District 3. We haven't said anything about that tonight. And so I just want to listen to that argument or that discussion.
Leaf, what was the boundary by which you decided on that line? When you
Well, as best as blocks would allow, and there's a little bit of give and play in that, how you choose the blocks. I tried to follow the watershed boundary between the Russian River, taking that portion of District 1 that's in the Eel River watershed and put it back into District 3. Primarily the split, the ridge between Potter Valley is right here on the watershed line. So you have to go down on the other side of the ridge to get to Van Arsdale and the particular folks that live out along here. Up in here, you've got mostly mountainous area. So granted, the people who live in Van Arsdale and along this road here, and going out to Lake Pillsbury within Mendocino County, I'm sure that they consider themselves, their community of interest to be Potter Valley. But there is a natural break here. And in other words, we're not splitting Potter Valley itself physically in two, but, you know, again, community of interest, I'm sure these folks, you know, would probably consider themselves within that community of interest. And there is room to play around here. You don't have to follow exactly that closely. It may be that you could take some of these bigger blocks that are less populated out here in the mountainous area and put them in, or you might leave it just the way it is. I mean, there are options to take a look at these.
As the commissioner from Potter Valley, I regularly, my wife will tell you, I regularly in the middle of the night respond to calls on the other side of the hill. Whether or not that defines the other side of, you know, Van Arsdale as within my community of interest, I think it would be great to hear from people from Van Arsdale. There is a level of remoteness out there that is Covelo-esque. So I could be wrong. So it's one of those things I hope we do hear from somebody and I can reach out. But there are also, you know, firefighters within the volunteer fire department that respond from over the hill. Pillsbury now does have its own fire department. So there is a natural sort of split that happened there. But if we don't have to, I don't see why we would. But
I think my concern would be that if you're the supervisor for the 3rd district, to try to serve that community is a lot more problematic because of the roads than it would be for the supervisor in the 1st district to serve that district. And that would be a concern I would have.
As we're looking at the map now, it seems like we might be able to, that might not be necessary. Leaf? Is that correct?
We haven't looked at, there may be some more issues with that area along the coast and how the contiguity of leaving that one small part there that's on the west side of Highway 1 goes up to 409, to have to take a look at how that area meets the other criteria. If it's contiguous or if it just meets at a corner. Those are criteria we have to take a look at, and then maybe add a little bit more on the east side of Highway 1 and see what those numbers come out to be. But in draft map 1, the numbers were somewhat balanced differently, and it was helpful to take this particular area from District 1 and put it in District 3 to kind of offset the numbers by bringing in Hopland and the area east of 101. So, it is a sort of a balancing game that you have to fine tune here and there. But again, we look at communities of interest, and that's probably something that you might want to look into and see if we can get some input from those folks.
And we should definitely talk about that in item number 7. Dee, you had your hand raised?
I just wondered, well, first, I agree with you that Van Arsdale should be part of Potter Valley, but Leaf, is there any way we can see the Mendocino National Forest? I mean, I think that would it might put all this big area out here in 3 and 1 into perspective, because I don't think nobody can live on the National Forest, right? But if we could see where it is, we talked about how big 3 was, but I know the eastern boundary, I think, is Mendocino National Forest. So just kind of puts it more into perspective as to what we're looking at.
Yeah, I think that's a really good idea, because also reviewing what happened in 2011, the bigness of 3 was a concern, even though, just as you said, part of it is owned by the federal government.
Right.
So you're just getting into the southern edge of the national forest within Mendocino County at this point. There may be a little bit more further south, but this is primarily the southern edge. I can zoom out a little bit. You can see this yellow area is the national forest boundary.
But that does sort of gutturally, visually make District 3 not seem so big geographically.
Yeah.
Paula, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I wanted some clarification from Leaf. When you were talking about the west side of Road 409 and your concern there, did I mishear you?
No, you did not.
Because that's, part of Casper South.
So here's the census designated place boundary. When I originally worked on draft 1, I included this area as well. Taking that out, you can see here's the coastline right here. These 2 pieces are coming together at just a corner, which is kind of taboo as far as contiguity goes. The contiguity criteria. It might be problem is the blocks are not too small here, so we don't have a lot of granularity to work with. See, that's one big block, and if we assign that back to this district,
it's hilly. There's not a lot out there till you get down to the ocean.
Well, it takes away from District 4.
Is there any other place without cutting the Round Valley Reservation to recover?
Well, we have done that quite a bit already. But we could take, which we haven't talked about, which we could take a look at. These blocks out here are pretty sparsely populated. But, you might look at extending that further down there to pick up a little bit of population. The problem is most of the other population is at this southeast corner of District 4 as presented here. You can see we're coming up against what would be the community of interest of Willets, Brook Trails, you know, staying just far enough away not to encroach some of the 20-acre subdivisions up in here, Sylvandale, the Brook Trails Community Service District. So there's not a lot of room to add much more here. Again, we're coming right up to Laytonville here before we make the turn to go up north. So there actually isn't a lot of room on that east side that we already haven't looked at. Now, we may be able to pick up a little bit more here, but then we're getting very close to sort of the Compshe community service area. But you know, you could dip this boundary down a little bit lower down in here. But frankly, there's not a lot of people, and we'd have to see how that changes the population numbers.
And
So
Compshe wants to stay in
where
District
are we
5.
right now in terms of total deviation?
Well, putting that one block knocks the 4th district into about a -5. And roughly speaking, that would give us, let's see, 17. That would give us about an 8.7% variation between the least populated and most populated districts. Now that's under 10, but that's kind of high. So,
But it is.
Somebody was trying to say something. Paula?
I think it was D, not me.
I said it is under 10 though, so.
Yeah, I think that
Sticking
at
with
some
that.
point it becomes the Board of Supervisors' decision if they want to
Yeah.
go forward with a map at that outer limits. And we should at least include a map that's as good as we can do that's under 10. And leave it to the Board of Supervisors to decide if that's too much. But that's my opinion. Paula?
Oh, nope, I have nothing else to say.
Peter?
Lower hand.
Yeah, I'm going to raise a flag here. That area is a very high population area, that census tract along the coast. We're talking about the area south of Cosper down to Russian Gulch. And on the west side of Highway 1, you have a fairly large high, it's the Point Cabrillo area, and it's fairly high population. So moving it into the 5th makes a big impact. And all the input we've gotten, I haven't heard anybody talking from that particular area about being asked to be moved into the 5th district. The area that people talk about, Road 409, is to the east of Highway 1, and it heads out towards the Woodlands. And we've only gotten a couple of comments from people there, but that's a fairly low population area, that particular census block. And I think it you know, the trouble I'm having with that is the people that live in that coastal census block that you've now moved into the 5th they're kind of in between Casper and the village of Mendocino. And some of them are pretty closely tied to Casper. So you would be, I think, having a fairly significant impact on a community of interest. There's a whole subdivision along that Casper Cove and south that would be impacted by doing that. And I really have concerns about doing that, specifically if the intent is so that you can change the boundary line for Hopland. And I just got to tell you, I have a feeling that there isn't anything in the record here that says those people want to be moved into the 5th from the 4th where they're currently in.
Peter, I don't understand. I mean, there's nothing in the record for most of the lines that were moved between the 3rd and the 4th.
Well, the reason that we're moving the 3rd and the 4th boundary line is simply because they butt each other, and because the disparity is the greatest between the two districts in terms of the population count. But as Leaf is pointing out here, you've got a single point of contact to maintain. If you take where his hand is right now, and you put that in the 5th, but the next block over, you put back in the 4th, you've got a really, you've lost your single point, you've lost your contiguity of that boundary line. And it's also just clearly obvious that the reason that it's being done is so that you can shift a boundary line for Hopland. And I'm just telling you, I'd have a hard time supporting that. Unless I saw some real evidence that those people in that area really wanted to be in the 5th and not in the 4th.
Paula?
Well, I think, Peter, you're talking about the South Casper area on the other
Yeah.
side of the bridge south.
Yes.
Two things about that. The people who live there definitely will want to be in the 5th. A lot of them work there. The other thing is the reality that you've got like Point Cabrillo Lighthouse, and you have areas in there that are, a lot of those are second homes for people and rentals. But I would definitely say the Casper South folk will want to align with the 5th district. And I don't remember, Leaf, you were saying how many population is in that whole area. And I'm assuming that the river, the water boundary, the bridge there is kind of the dividing line. Don't remember the name of the bridge. Goes up to the dump on 409.
Paula, your fly came and found me.
I'm gonna lower my hand.
Oh, did it? You can have it.
See, the coast and the
only one
inland
left in
really
the
aren't as
house.
divided as we thought. The fly made it all the way here.
Yeah. Who'd have thought? I'm waiting for its 48 hours to be over.
Dee?
I feel like well, you hit on it when you said that there's a lot of lines here that we haven't heard from. I think it's important that we all keep an open mind and not lose sight of the fact that in order to do the job that we've been tasked with, we may have to make some recommendations like this one that's maybe not perfect in someone's mind, but it solves a problem. I don't know how to say this without sounding really negative, but I think it's important that we keep an open mind, that we may not all get everything that we want to happen here, but we have a problem to solve. And I think this map is a good option for us to consider.
I think we're also really lucky that we don't have to only recommend one. So I don't think we need to go
Yeah.
too far. You know, we're looking at 3 to 4 or 2 to 3
Mhm.
staff to publish 3 to 4 draft maps, and then yeah.
I think this is a good option for us to present as the solution for the Hopland area, as well as the overall population split.
Chairman Farmer, if I may,
Yes.
just to explain, in draft 1, I added these 3 blocks to the 5th district because we had, I was looking at 3 pieces of public comment. One to bring it up to the northern boundary to similar to Road 409. And, you know, the blocks aren't perfect and I didn't want to cut Casper in half. So that's why you got this sort of jagged edge here. We had another one to bring the northern boundary up to the Casper Bridge. And then another one to bring the northern boundary up to Fern Creek Road. So at the time, we didn't have a lot of public comment. So when you had 3 pieces of public comment, it kind of looked like, well, what can we do there? Can we take a look at it? And again, it was a concept map from draft 1. So that's just the rationale. I don't know if that helps your decision-making process or not, but that was sort of the rationale.
I also think that a lot of the public comment saying leave it alone was saying leave Mendocino there. It wasn't saying leave everything alone. But also some of the public comment was saying no to redistricting. That was my favorite public comment. You know, clearly there's an interest to leave it alone. Just saying no to redistricting. But no, so Leaf, at this point, you know, the effort we've put into talking about this map is clearly, can we request that this be published with the proper data so that can be further discussed in the next meeting?
Yes, I'll work on it tomorrow and probably have something by the end of the day.
And so I know that there was a topic of conversation for another meeting. The problem I see is that if the maps need to be published for 5 days, that really, even if we all want to put in the effort to have another meeting, there's really not any time to do that anyway. Am I correct?
Well, if we don't meet for 7 days and it's published tomorrow, then I think we can meet that 5-day deadline. But
I'm saying but our next meeting is 29th. So
Yes.
it wouldn't really get us another meeting. It would just move up the next meeting.
Isn't the 29th just at the Board of Supervisors?
Oh no, sorry, you're right. That's the draft. Okay. Well, we can discuss this in the
Board of
if you want to talk about adding a meeting. Is there anything else we want to ask Leaf to do regarding this map?
I think this map is good.
So Mary, it occurred to me that the reason Leaf put together draft 4 is to play with it, including your ideas. But do you feel like your ideas have been explored in this map, or would you like to look at draft 4 and play with that?
No, I'm pretty comfortable with this.
And Chair Farmer, we do have public comment.
Okay, if we're done with commissioner comment, please, if there's any public comment on the item, I'd like to hear it.
Absolutely. So the first person is going to be Monique Ramirez. We'll put her in right now.
Hello, can you guys hear me okay? My name is Monique Ramirez and I live in District 3 and I'm outside of Covelo up Minor Road and I live about 5 minutes from the Trinity County line. And looking at the draft 2 map would, as it currently stood before you guys started making modifications, would put me into District 4. And I operate a Covelo cannabis advocacy group, and I wouldn't even be able to really represent my advocacy group if I'm not even in the same district as the rest of our membership. And the thing that really concerns me is for the Round Valley Tribal Reservation to be at all split up. I think that it's really important to keep our reservation intact, even if it's spread out. And part of the argument there could be made that, yeah, it is rural and there's not a lot of people that will be gained included, and so therefore we shouldn't be bothered by not doing that. And I also really want to see Laytonville remain in District 3 as well. I think that we share a lot of the same communal interests, and especially from the cannabis agricultural standpoint as well in our advocacy work. And so I would just hope that that comment will be noted and considered as you guys move forward with these maps. So thank you so much for letting me speak.
All right, and then the next one we'll have here is going to be Mari.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Hello, thank you for taking calls. I was just calling to say, please don't split Covelo into different districts. Just keep it District 3 for so many reasons. And sometimes I feel like there's this weird discrimination against growers. And we have an advocacy group in Covelo, and we would like to keep that intact. So thank you for listening. Have a good night. Thank you.
Is there any more public comment?
That's all public comment.
Leaf, does this map as it stands keep the ridge line of Covelo intact?
All of Round Valley is in the 3rd district. All of the reservation would be in the 3rd district, and the main area of Laytonville is in the 3rd district with this version, as it's been modified tonight.
Well, thank you. So let's move on to agenda item number 7 and talk about how we can get some public comment that will make our lives even harder by bringing them in on the lines that we just did. So I'd like to volunteer to reach out to Northern Potter Valley, over the hill, Van Arsdale, and try to elicit some public comment just by making some phone calls. Mary?
I actually posted in the Redwood Valley Community Awareness site, haven't got much back, but then I posted in the Laytonville Area Municipal Advisory Council area, and Jim Shields, who's on their county water board, has invited me to a public meeting at Harwood Hall tomorrow night in Laytonville. And their district supervisor, Mr. Hashek, will also be there. But they want a presentation, and then they want to be able to give 1.5 hours of public comment back. So I think we'll be hearing at least more from Laytonville. I don't know if we'll actually hear from the tribal nations.
So Charlotte, for a meeting like that tomorrow, is there, there's no way to, could we show a clip of what we just did? Would that be considered posting a map, or would that be?
So this is recorded, this meeting, and anyone from the public can review it. There is nothing wrong with any members of the public reviewing it at any point. I think it'll be probably uploaded pretty shortly after it's completed its live feed. And I think it's totally up to anyone in the public to view it in whatever way they wish. My only comment would be to just make sure that not a majority of the commission attends the same public meeting and has discussion with on your decision-making process, and but there's certainly no problem if one commissioner, and it sounds like Mary is interested in attends and reports back or discusses that we have a meeting coming up and invites public comment and listens to public comment just among the MAC.
Dee?
I just wanted to share that I spoke with Juan Orozco again, and he feels really strongly that the Latinx community in the Ukiah Valley area should be represented in one district, and his recommendation was from Plant Road to Lover's Lane. So I don't think it's viable, but I wanted to share that that's what his feelings were. I reached out to 3 other individuals that were referred to me as representatives of this community. I have not been able to get through to any of them. I also spoke with the administrator of the Round Valley Indian Tribes, and she was very interested in this whole process. They had no idea this was going on, which I thought was pretty sad, but I was glad that I was able to talk to them, and she's going to speak with the tribal council. So hopefully we'll be hearing from them too. So I just wanted to share that.
Leaf, could you give us a professional count of what that population is from Plant Road to Lover's Lane, so that Dee can relate that to Juan as to what
it's a very highly populated area. That one of the draft 1 takes the area from Plant Road to the city limit east of Highway 101 and puts that into the 2nd district. I don't think it's going to be possible to take that area to the west and do the same thing without then having to get rid of population somewhere else in the 2nd district.
All I was asking is it so that she could give him a clear answer as to why that's not possible. Or is that actually represented in the draft 3? Is that the number that would be well represented by draft 3?
Not necessarily, but I can work that up for you guys.
Just so that's not like a no, it won't work, but no, the population is X, I think is a nice.
I will add that into District 2, and then we'll get the figures for it.
Especially as the mayor, I think it'd be nice for him to really understand why that's something we're not doing. So, Mary, I think reaching out to Laytonville is great. I would loosely like to say I'd like to come as well, as long as no other commissioners are interested, and I have to check if I could do that at all. But are there any other commissioners that would like to attend that meeting? I will if I can. So are there any other, what about this? Are there any other communities of interest that we need to? I reached out to Round Valley Tribes as well, and but it sounds like Dee, you're making better progress than me. And I'm supposed to be meeting with Hopland tribes as well. And we'll have that, I'll make sure that happens before the next meeting.
Chairman Farmer, if I may, just for the record, I have been asked to attend that Zoom meeting with the Layton Bill group as well.
So that's a Zoom meeting.
Well, it's an in-person meeting and a Zoom meeting, so it's a hybrid meeting.
Charlotte, so all of us attending it as a Zoom meeting isn't a problem because we wouldn't be discussing amongst each other.
I'll be
if I could
I'll be
answer,
attending in person. I'm sorry.
I think, so if the commission, I would caution against the entire commission attending virtually and or in person. I think because this is a public meeting in the times of COVID, there are recommendations and there's been a revision to the Brown Act law that contemplates this is actually a public meeting. So I would caution against a majority of the commission attending the same meeting, whether in person or virtual. However, 2 commissioners is not a quorum of this commission, so I don't see any issue with selecting a couple of commissioners to attend. I would caution against any discussion. I would, in terms of how you would be deciding this process, and look at it more as a tool for you to learn more about public input on your decision making going forward.
We live in strange times. Okay, so I think we have a few plans to try to bring in a little bit more public comment. Is there any public comment on our outreach efforts?
There is no public comment from this.
And Chair Farmer, oh, sorry, Charlotte.
I was just, maybe Sherry, you were about to say this. I just wanted to make sure if there was any staff update related to community outreach to provide an opportunity for Sherry.
Oh, yeah. So thank you. We do continue to send out e-notifications. So we reach about 900 emails. We are continuing with our radio ads. They run twice a day. And then and then the newspapers also. And also to let you know, the board meeting agenda will publish tomorrow too for the October 26th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. So on to item number 8, upcoming meetings and the redistricting timeline. Glenn McGorty did tell me there were 4 meetings involved with this when he called me about it. But it looks like we might need to add another one.
Yeah.
So right now we've got a public outreach on the 3rd, and then present maps to the Board of Supervisors on the 9th of November.
I think we should meet next week.
So obviously we need to wait the 5 days for the maps to be published. Otherwise, we won't be able to talk very much. So would that be on Monday? What day is
Next
Monday?
Wednesday? Next Wednesday? Would be 6 days?
Yeah, we could publish on Friday. That would give staff time to publish on Friday.
2 days.
If we met on Wednesday.
Charlotte?
I was just going to say, did I stop my video? No. I was going to respond, and I think Sherry said it, but we could, and I think Commissioner Powelson said this, but Wednesday might be a good option if the commission is available, because it would provide Leaf a little bit of time tomorrow to work on fine tuning this map. And then if there are any other maps that the public has submitted or any other suggestions from the public, if he's able to, you know, publish them with the tables, we could do that. I also wanted to make sure that we got clarity on if you would like the maps titles. I think I overheard this earlier in the meeting, but we did attempt to put caveats on each map to explain they had not yet been considered by the commission. They were essentially get along the lines of, these are brainstorming maps. If you'd like, we could say revise it, but I think keeping also just a number in terms of, this is the number map the first map that was drawn, the second is useful also for chronology and just tracking the work.
No, I just do, if there's people who are not now yet paying attention and then look it up, I don't think we need to have any public comments telling us that, you know, maps 3 and 4 don't fit the population criteria. I think a note mentioning that map 3 is representative of watersheds and is an interesting tool to understand the other ones, just something saying this is for watersheds but does not meet the population criteria, and something similar at the top, as big as it says draft, making it clear that draft 4 does not meet the population criteria.
Commissioner Farmer, if I may, I think what we would do for the next meeting is we would only publish those maps that are still being considered by the commission going forward. So that might be remedy the issue. And I know it would not, and I know there's still members of the public that may get confused and think that the previous maps are being considered. But I know that we would only be discussing the maps that the commission wants to discuss going forward that meet the criteria. And right now that would be 1, 2, and then any further drafting that Leaf does from the comments at this meeting.
That makes sense. I think that solves it. I mean, it worked out great. I you know, got a lot of comments. Okay, so do we need to have a vote on adding a meeting on Wednesday? Someone want to make a motion?
I move.
Would this be another 6:30 meeting?
We,
time?
Commissioner Farmer, we were going to offer if you wanted to have any discussion about adjusting the time, if that was at all a concern about eliciting more comment, if you wanted to start the meeting any earlier, you know, and staff would be, I think we can pull, you know, and provide to let you know right now, I think we could make ourselves available on Wednesday and then at the time that you choose.
I think that sticking to the same time works, but anybody else? Peter?
Well, my question I wanted to raise is, we have October 26th for a presentation to the Board of Supervisors. And there isn't any discussion about what we're going to do at that meeting. And I think it would, in my mind at least, it impacts what we do on the 27th. Pursue if we're going to schedule a meeting for then. So what is the plan for the 26th?
Chair Farmer, if you would like, I can respond, and then Sherry could expand upon anything if I've left anything out. As it shows in the item number 8, the 26th, we have a time slot and the public meeting, Board of Supervisors meeting, to provide and to receive any additional updates from staff, continue to receive public input and on communities of interest and potential district boundaries. And also we would provide an update to the Board of Supervisors on the work done thus far by the commission. And there can be also, of course, discussion of maps. But I think I understand from the commission, there's an interest in having further meetings next week on Wednesday to get more into the next additional line drawing. So perhaps it would be an update to the Board of Supervisors on where we're at as of the end of this meeting, that we reviewed drafts 1 through 4, 2 of which were determined to not meet criteria, and 2 of which did have the population criteria in mind, and that there was discussion on adjusting and creating a 5th draft map that should have been published by the time of the Board of Supervisors meeting. So there will be an opportunity to share that. I think that was the tentative plan. Of course, any other, and then receiving any direction the Board of Supervisors may have for the commission, since they can provide and direct the commission on some topics. I may have questions for the commission.
And it would be a public hearing, so we're liable to get some input from the public about these proposed maps as well. And would the staff be able to respond to that input on the 27th?
It's possible that it depends on what comment is received. It may be that some of that would not be able to be, if there were maps offered on Tuesday, perhaps we wouldn't be able to publish them and have all the statistics ready. But I think there could be similar line drawing discussions that consider all of the public comment, and then from that meeting, additional draft maps could be created for the following week.
And so we'd meet on the 27th to further look at maps, and then on November 3rd, we would meet to try to determine if we can make a recommendation for one or more maps that would then go to the board on November 9th. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I think we have here, 2 to 3, 3 to 4. There is no set number of maps that you have to recommend. It could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be more than that, but you want to keep it to a reasonable number. Certainly that you are able to reach some consensus on, and maybe you or a majority vote on, and maybe that 2 or 3 are what you land on. It's really up to the commission.
Leaf?
Yes, Chairman Farmer, there are 2 maps that are going to be published later this week that you did not see tonight. So there is a 5th and 6th draft proposals out there. So the one we were looking at tonight would be the 7th, just so everyone's clear on that. So when you have your meeting with the Board of Supervisors, they'll be published on the website.
They will be published within time for them to be presented at the Board of Supervisors. That's a reasonable.
Their meeting's on the 26th?
Yes.
Yeah.
You're a champ. D?
Leaf, is one of those maps the ones I sent you that has District 2 completely within District 1?
Yes, it is.
Well, Charlotte said that's not viable, so we can just stop working on that one.
Okay.
So,
I like donut map.
I do too.
From an urban planner's perspective, that's kind of how they see the world, right?
All right.
Okay.
All right.
So, and then that the November 3rd meeting works. We'll have 5 days between the other 2 meetings. So we'll be able to receive more comment and discuss the maps that we created there. So I think we should put it to can we go back and have a motion, Dee?
I move that we add the meeting on October 27th at 6:15.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I'll second.
Thanks, Mary. I think you won the race, even with your slow internet. So we'll put it to a vote. Dee,
Yes.
Mary,
Yes.
Paula,
Yes.
Peter,
Yes.
and Kyle, yes. Do we have any public comment on this item?
No public comment on this item.
Okay, on to agenda item number 9, proposed topics for the upcoming meeting. You have staff updates, communities of interest testimony, consideration of maps based on community input, redistricting criteria, narrowing of maps for recommendation, the Board of Supervisors on November 9th. That could probably be reworked in the wording now that we've had another meeting between now and November 9th. And then upcoming meetings and the commissioner input. Getting tired.
We don't need to have the review current district boundaries for equal population, do we? We did that tonight.
That is correct. I would recommend that we still, in our update to the Board of Supervisors, show briefly, that map with the population statistics, because we're providing an update to the board, but we wouldn't at our next commission meeting need to include it unless the commission sees value in revisiting it for the public in any way.
I think we're good.
Is there anything else that we need to have on this next agenda? Okay. Do we have any public comment on this agenda?
No public comment on this agenda.
I think we can adjourn the meeting.
Yay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for staying.
Bye.